for me nowadays, when I see somebody who portrays themselves as always strong, always perfect, I just know it's not true. It's not possible for any human to be this flawless person. And once I realized that, I'm like, I just own that now because it's completely normal and there's nothing to hide. It doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of love or anything. If I see other people doing way better than me in something I'm also pursuing, it's a mirror to me that I'm actually not living up to my potential. And for me, it was like the constant approval of women, so that people see I get the woman, being able to tell my friends who I met yesterday, and basically created a whole business around having fun, meeting people from all over the world, meeting different women, and being the guy in the spotlight with the tattoos and the long blonde hair and being on camera and all of these things. And it was fun, but looking back now, I saw also there was a few deeper reasons for why I had created that. And at some stage, I started to feel empty.
I don't think any of us come out unscathed without any bruises, wounds, or any perhaps meanings that we had then created or interpretations that we make that essentially lead us to adapting from our true nature.
This constant pleasure seeking, organizing events, being in the spotlight was completely distracting me from the things I didn't want to look at. I get goosebumps now when I think about it. Experience of that's what I want to feel like as a man. Responsible, in integrity, open heart, loving, not shying away from my emotions. In fact, I think now that's really masculine to have the courage to sometimes share what's real rather than avoid it. That's really got me thinking about this topic and like, hey, this is beautiful. And it made me sad how it's talked about in society now. You know, this being that bad thing to be masculine. I'm like, if they would just felt what I have felt, they could never say that, because I was way more dangerous to society, to women, less of a contribution when I was not masculine at all.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. Rene, it's a pleasure to be sitting here with you, man. Welcome to the Heart of Man.
Thank you so much for having me.
I was very much looking forward to our conversation today and to as well just give our listeners a bit of a debrief. I had first met Rene, I believe, 2 years ago or a bit over 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think at a birthday party in Bali.
Yes, and I as well recall that you were going through the breathwork training at the time with Breathwork Bali, same training I had done as well, a bit over 4 years ago now. And we hadn't connected much at that time, had a few times where we dropped in, and then recently you had as well come back to Bali. We had a more deeper and more extensive exploration, and there was numerous conversations and subject matters that we as well connected on, subjects around relationships, masculinity, breathwork, and I felt compelled just to have you on the podcast and as well explore all these subject matters. So really excited to dive into all of that today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm actually, I'm a little bit nervous today because I know the nature of our conversation that we had, what's about to come today. And I think we're going to talk about some things that really matter to me and touch me. And it's nice to be able to share, because usually I'm hosting as well our podcast. So yeah, it's excitement and a little bit of nervousness.
I love that, man. And, you know, it's interesting because I feel that same nervousness. And one of the things as well that I've been exploring recently is this desire to be more raw, this desire to be more human, this desire to bring more of me out on the table, because I don't know about you, Rene, but like I've definitely learned very early on just to there was always almost a stigma for me that I got to be solid as a man and I got to have everything figured out, and any aspects of me that are any rough edges, you know, any aspects of me that are somewhat flawed or imperfect or maybe reveal a little bit too much of my humanness. This is usually where I have instinctually almost this sense of, oh no, I need to protect that, I need to guard that, I need to close myself off of that from showing that to anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, we both have the clear people-pleasing history, and for me, it showed up in like this extreme fear of being misunderstood and also being seen as a bad person. And in some ways, the things we're talking about now, this topic of masculinity in today's world, is a trigger topic for many. And naturally, if I will speak my truth about it, there will be people who are, you know, kind of pissed off. And I learned to be okay with that. But it's still something, of course, this part will never completely go away, I think. I'm aware of it. But also, I think it's super important to just, as you say, be raw. And I think the really interesting things come out when it's a little bit controversial.
And this is something I really want to as well commend you for. Again, we don't know each other very well, but from the conversations we've had so far, and as well some of the interviews that I'd listened in that you had done with Pete and you know, other conversations, I was very impressed by the way you were willing to show your flaws and by the way you were willing to show your imperfections and almost draw a little bit of humor into the mix. And I think, to me, this is really where we actually alchemize or work through that emotion of shame, I'm going to say, that it can so often be present when we're afraid of being judged by others, being afraid to be rejected, or afraid that we might be bad people. I can definitely relate to that. And I had my own experiences around that I'm still navigating, truthfully. And when we can acknowledge those aspects and even make somewhat fun of them, not in a way to degrade ourselves or to belittle ourselves, but actually to make fun of the fact that we're human and maybe somewhat fucked up. At least that's kind of how I see it. I think it definitely lightens the load.
Yeah. So, I mean, always trying to portray this perfect picture. That's definitely what I used to do. But this acceptance and understanding, we all have our, you know, baggage to carry. We all are imperfect, and it's simply impossible for any human to be this flawless person. And once I realized that, I'm like, I just own that now, because it's completely normal, and there's nothing to hide. And it doesn't mean that I'm not worthy of love or anything. It's just, this is my story. And I think the same in relationships. Finding a person that also has accepted that nobody is perfect, and just talking about flaws in a way that is just normalize that, and just have a conversation around it. Because people who, for me nowadays, when I see somebody who portrays themselves as always strong, always perfect, I just know it's not true. It's not possible. So
and I notice as I hear you say these things, I feel some relief. And this is as well what I often hear from other people when we're willing to really share those things that generally or usually people would not share. Other people are like, oh, I can be human within this environment, within this space here with this individual. And, you know, I think this could actually be a fitting and like right moment to actually share that we actually had a very similar situation around that, where we had met once last year, and then we had another conversation, I think it was a week ago, and you had communicated to me that the way that I showed up was very differently. Before I add anything to that, I wonder, could you share with us a little bit of your observations of what you noticed?
It was super interesting. Full honesty, I was talking to my business partner Pete when we met in winter. I couldn't pin it down, but something felt off. I didn't feel super comfortable in our conversation, and I thought, you know, there's nothing you've done to me, and I respect your work, but there was just something off. And then you reached out to me when I came 6 months later back to Bali, and I was surprised because I thought you feel the same, and I was surprised that you want to meet again. And then I said to Pete, I'm like, you know, old me would have probably come up with some excuse now as to why I can't meet or whatever. And then I thought, there's only two options. Either I would do that, but that doesn't feel right anymore. And the second option is I just say it. We meet and I just say it. In the past, impossible for me. I would have manipulated the situation somehow just to avoid any type of, because maybe then you give me some negative feedback as well, and I wanted to avoid that. And maybe you say then something bad about me to others and all of this. No, like Alex is a great man doing good work, and I'm sure actually a conversation like this will create more connection. And it was really fun to talk about it in the end.
Absolutely. And that felt really true. And I think that was also the experience that I had at the end, where, you know, essentially I confessed some things to you that were alive for me, that were coming up. And, you know, I'll just be very raw about it here right now. I noticed that I felt some envy towards you. And I noticed as well that there was an aspect of me that felt like I had to compete with you because we're very much doing similar work and operating in the same line of work. And of course, there is this one aspect of me, and this is something I want to explore a little bit with you. This idea of like, in my instinct, I actually want to celebrate other people's success. And I want to celebrate it when people are doing great things in the world and are creating an incredible impact, particularly other men that I admire and appreciate, you know, and this is what I've been seeing that you had been doing with Pete within your company really align. You guys have been doing some awesome fucking work, and you guys have been creating some amazing impact for people. But I noticed that there was this aspect of me that had almost this narrative that if I allowed myself to celebrate that and appreciate that and cheer you guys on, it would mean that I am less than. It would mean that I am not as valuable. And again, I don't know where this is fucking coming from. I think it's a little bit in the zeitgeist of our times around story of being a man, and as well what it means to be a man, and as well just this competitive edge that we can sometimes have as men. And don't get me wrong, I think there's healthy components to competition. But I think particularly in that moment, it really showed to me some of the more unhealthy, arguably toxic elements of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you like that we have this conversation and that, you know, you recognize those parts, can speak to it. That in itself is already really great. And I think interesting for people. What I notice in retreats often is that there's a willingness to be honest and to live in integrity for many of the guys we work with, but they're not even in real time aware of what's happening in certain situations. And they just have the mask on autopilot. And I think that's the first step, like to really have this awareness. And to go more specifically into your point, I can totally relate to this struggle to be celebrating other men who, especially if they do similar things to me. And I think two things in my journey here were important. The one is just work on myself with breathwork and all of this, to just feel better about who I am, no matter what the outside circumstances are, and be more grounded in that. And then I think number two, a huge one for me, is if I see other people doing way better than me in something I'm also pursuing, it's a mirror to me that I'm actually not living up to my potential.
That's it.
Because I know I can. And then it shows me that actually I'm not doing what I can. And for me as a man, just living up to my potential, using the abilities that I have to bring something into the world, no matter if that makes as much money as this person, that's not the point. But I want to feel, if I'm really honest to myself, that I'm doing the right things most of the days. And that's actually much more fulfilling than just, we talked about this topic of pleasure, which I very much used to live in the past, which is masked as happiness. And maybe as a young man, that was great for a time just to explore and seek pleasure. But I think the older we get, the more we feel, I don't know, responsibility becoming a beautiful thing rather than something I try to avoid.
Yeah, I definitely still want to tie a bow to the things that we have addressed so far. And then I would like to weave our conversation a little bit to, I'm going to say, the very different life that you had led prior to everything that you're doing now. But it was so fascinating for me because this was 6 months ago when we had our first conversation. Is that correct?
I think January, February.
Okay, wow.
Like
well, at that time, I must say, first of all, of course, I noticed that there was a part of me that wasn't fully open to you. Like there was some tension. But had I really reflected upon what was really underneath the surface? Not really. Because I wasn't willing in some ways to actually own the fact that, a part of me feels envious and part of me feels like I'm not good enough. Like that was really what was coming up. And I think over the last 6, 7 months, just through as well the deeper personal journey that I've been on, I believe there is a deeper reclamation of my humanness, and also that it's okay to fail. And it's okay that failure is actually a stepping stone on this journey. And that me maybe not showing up yet to the potential that I deeply know lives inside of me. So I definitely resonate to the thing that you had just said. Doesn't necessarily, like, it doesn't have to be a slide on my character. And I think this is something as well that I had so often put together so closely. I hope that makes sense. Like, just this idea of how I'm performing and who I am as a man as a result of that.
Yeah.
And I think and this is also what had led me to maybe not be as bold with some of the actions that I felt compelled to take, because I felt as soon as I fail, it's not just I failed, but I'm a failure.
Yeah.
And that doesn't actually give a room to fail regularly. Like, I had a conversation with Edward just a few days ago, and one of the things that stood out for me in our conversation is that he is someone, and he prides himself on being someone that fails fast. And this is something that really stuck with me. Just this idea of failing fast. And this is something that I really want to reclaim into my life. But I think for me, and, bringing this here as well, live and within this conversation, it is for me a reclamation of my humanness, and a reclamation as well that, I have my own edges, and that in many ways I'm still imperfect, and, I got my own shit that I'm still navigating.
Yeah. Super interesting. Did you think about what it means for you, like failing fast, and how has it been until now?
Well, I consider that failure in many ways is a stepping stone to actually accomplishing the very thing that we need. Because to me, failure is just an aspect to many, perhaps, experiments, tries, tests we need to really take in order to actually accomplish something. They actually give us feedback to what is not working, gives us an opportunity to eliminate that very thing that is not working, and then draw our attention towards something else that we might have not yet looked at. So I see that failure in many ways, if I look at it just logically, is a stepping stone. But I think what I hadn't addressed in many ways is that, first of all, I didn't get, like, was one of the things I reflected on just a few days ago is that I actually didn't feel much of a permission to fail growing up. Like, particularly when I look at the relationship that I had with my mom, and just the ways that she was, very guarded and very overprotective towards me. There was this boisterous and very risk-taking nature in myself that I couldn't really fully live out. And there was such a strong sense that if I do something wrong, bad, fail, then love might be removed from me, which had essentially now brought me here, 32 years of age, realizing that I have struggled with failure because I believe that if I really allowed myself to lean into it, that people won't accept me anymore. That people won't love me anymore. And so I think that is what has in some ways stopped me. I noticed that I'm not sure if I fully addressed your question or if that was the entirety of it.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, but I think my question was, how slow or fast would you have failed if something bad had happened to you? How would you deal with it, and how long did it take you to recover from it?
Yeah.
Versus what do you make of Edward's definition of failing fast? And
a lot slower, a lot slower, man. Like, I think for me, like, I would be very calculated with the actions that I take. I would try to control the circumstances beforehand, and I would really plan out heavily what is the right action to take. But so often there is certain things that you can't predict in advance. I mean, let me just take a very tangible example that I think anyone can relate to. Imagine you go to a bar and then you see this really beautiful woman in front of you, right? Like an aspect of me, you know, like maybe in my younger 20s, would have considered all the kinds of different ways that I would have maybe brought an opener or, you know, went over to this woman. And then I would imagine myself getting into this conversation with her and the way I would lead the conversation. And I noticed that the more I would dive into that, the more anxiety I would essentially feel, because in many ways I cannot control, nor can I even predict what her responses might be. You know, what she might say, how she will receive me. And I think it really requires that capacity to actually be with uncertainty as it arises and just dive in. And I didn't have that in many ways. And I think there is still this tendency at times to want to figure it out in advance. But the more I do this, the more I recognize that there's actually no capacity. I mean, if I think about just this podcast right now, this is absolutely not what I'd planned to talk about with you. You know, this is not what I intended for this conversation. But I'm kind of enjoying where we're going. And I think it is, I hope it at least it's of value to some listeners for us to talk about these things. But I think it requires this capacity. But to answer your question, it was very slow. And when things wouldn't show up in the way that I would want them to show up, I would feel ashamed and I would collapse essentially. And it would probably take me a few days to recover. And then I would be very hesitant to actually like step out. It's almost like I'm opening the door slightly and say, is it safe for me to come out? And it would take some time for me to really find my, you know, what I would describe my inner authority again within this entire conversation. So yeah, that's a bit around my relationship to failure.
Nice. Thanks.
So perhaps we can maybe explore a little bit of the structure that I'd intended, because I essentially want our listeners as well to get to know you, but also explore some of the themes that I think we can extrapolate just from your own personal story. And as I'd mentioned before, and when I was diving into your story, it was really impressive to see how you had truly been living a very different life. It's almost like you had like, you know, Rene 1.0 and now we got Rene 2.0. And so perhaps we can begin by bringing our listeners up to speed, where you can share with them a little bit of your upbringing, but also this very pivotal chapter of your life where you had built your first company, Life is a Beach Party.
Yeah. Initially, I just want to say I had a funny conversation with a friend of mine. He said, I don't know anybody who has changed as much as you. And it's all, and then I explored this and I said, it's funny. I almost look back at 25-year-old me, and it's like, I almost separate that from who I am today. Everything that I did there, I have compassion for it, but I don't feel bad or anything for my mistakes, because I'm like, it was the best I could at the time. But it's like just so far away, almost like a second start to life in which I live a different life. So it's very interesting, like in my head. And some people struggle to comprehend the changes. If people who knew me from my old company, the travel company, where I was partying, long blonde hair at the beach all the time, they see me now, they probably think, what happened to this guy? And the guys who met me in the last 2 years, who see old videos, are laughing their asses off. Like we showed them at the retreat when I was like standing there with the drink screaming into the camera, and they're like, this is not real, you know? It's so different. So yeah, to answer your question, I grew up in Austria, small town in Bregenz, Lake of Constance. And yeah, I would say over a pretty nice childhood. But I never felt at home there, especially as when I became a teenager. I was always a little different. I thought different. And there it's a very, you know, everybody's doing the same thing, good quality of life. Everything that's a bit different is like frowned upon. And with my parents, overall, really, I'm really grateful for my parents. I got a lot of love. Felt always safe. So my childhood there's not much, like, of course, there's like certain things that, you know, were imprinted in me as well, but overall, my relationship to love and to my parents was really beautiful. However, my dad had also no dad, basically grew up all by himself. So he gave me a lot of love. He took very good care of me. But what it means to be a man is the way I look at it today, with all the responsibility and those qualities that I think are important. That's not something I got from him because he never got it either. And this is really something I explored only, I'm 40 years old now. Honestly, in the last 5 years, really, until I was 35, I was still very much a boy in many ways. And yeah, I escaped basically when I was 25. I moved to Norway for 3 years. I had a Norwegian girlfriend back then. That was my ticket to leave the Austrian town. And from then on, I never looked back. We founded our company. Life is a Beach Party. It's the name of it. Basically chasing endless summer, wanting to meet girls, which was way more important for me back then for my self-worth than building a $1 million company or something. Like, because many men want to build like this big business and then feel good about themselves. Now I made it.
Sure.
And for me, it was like the constant approval of women, so that people see I get the woman. I'm the guy, being able to tell my friends who I met yesterday, and basically created a whole business around having fun, meeting people from all over the world, meeting different women, and being the guy in the spotlight with the tattoos and the long blonde hair and being on camera and all of these things. And it was fun. But looking back now, I saw also there was a few deeper reasons for why I had created that. And at some stage, I started to feel empty.
Number of things you said here. I definitely want to bookmark this conversation around feeling the absence of, I'm going to say, initiation through your own father, and also the conversation around what it really means to be a man. And I want to dive a little bit more into perhaps some of the hidden motives and motivations that you had around building this company. And, some of the guys might be listening in here and saying, that sounds fucking awesome, Rene.
Yeah.
That sounds exactly like something I would really love.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could share with our listeners a little bit around some of the, as mentioned, hidden motives, but also what about it might have not been so glamorous that, we can initially not see.
Yeah, first of all, it was really fun for a while, and I'm
bet.
grateful for the experiences. So I could write a book about these 10 years in Greece. The hidden motives, I would say, first of all, this constant pleasure seeking, organizing events, being in the spotlight was completely distracting me from the things I didn't want to look at. So I got the recognition from the outside, constant validation, also a lot of alcohol and parties. Yeah. So it was just really masking up everything that was underneath, and I never had to look at it.
Right.
And I constantly got new fuel of outside validation that made me feel good about myself. And then I had low points when there was like some kind of break or some things didn't go my way, but I would quickly find ways to get, again, people patting my shoulder or be with a woman who just came in as a tourist, and that made me feel good. So yeah, that was definitely a hidden motive of it. Also running away from home, which was a place in a small town in Austria where I never felt accepted.
Yeah.
And it was almost like when I came home and I did what I did with this company, I constantly had to justify myself. So why do you have still long blonde hair? You can't make a living with this. You can't live like this. This is not healthy. Oh, but you have to think about your pension. You have to buy a house. Like constantly this. And then when I was away, it was just, it's so cool what you're doing. How did you start it? It was much more like curiosity towards me rather than judgment. So I've started to build resentment against my hometown at some stage in my life, actually. And I'm like, nah, I never want to go back there. So.
Well, a few things that stand out for me. So it definitely sounds like there was an absence of acceptance within your childhood home, and there's a lot of judgment and criticism that you're experiencing. Whereas when you were living this life that you essentially created, there was a lot of affirmation of your worth and your value, whether it was, through the parties that you would create where people could benefit from, the women that you would meet, and essentially like what that symbolized, what that presented when the hot woman would essentially be with you. So it sounds like there was a lot of that. I wonder, what were the things that you were not willing to look at the time that perhaps this time was distracting you from?
Um, I just, I had very low self-worth. I think many people can relate. I thought I was good enough.
Yep.
And I wasn't even aware of that at all until my trip to Peru in 2017, when I was in the jungle taking a certain medicine. And that like humbled me extremely and showed me who are you actually without all of these things. And yeah, I really dove deep into what it was. Like one very interesting thing was that my family, like we were, I had everything I needed, but we're quite a simple family. And my best friend's family was wealthy and well respected in town. And just being at dinners there many times a week, seeing how the father was perceived, how he would, everybody was laughing when he was laughing, really like respected, friends with the politicians. And me, on the other hand, we were really simple. So I thought, oh, in order to get respect, I need to be successful, have successful friends, and always thought that from this point of view, we are not good enough as a family. And then the next thing was also with my friends. All my friends were really tall, really good looking guys. I was the smallest when we were teenagers. I had glasses, big glasses, and nobody was interested in me and everybody was interested in them. So that's why I kind of like, okay, I am just by being in a room with these other guys, I'm not interesting. So I try to find ways to make myself interesting by also understanding people, reading the room, knowing what to say, saying the right thing. And that became a skill because of this. And also funny, even the tattoos and the long blonde hair that I had, I noticed now I did this to stand out more because I thought I am inherently too boring or not worthy of any attention or love. And I'm pretty sure came from the kind of friends that I had in my childhood.
I appreciate you speaking about this, and as well, like just maybe taking in one of the caveats that you had mentioned, sharing that you came from a very loving family where you had felt that sense of safety. So I mean, I would argue safety, love, belonging, those are some of the fundamental aspects, especially that we need in these developmental years of our lives. And I guess what I want to just highlight here is that there's so many men as well that come to me, and like sometimes I have these conversations where there's this conversation around, well, why is it even valuable to look at, these earlier years of our lives? Why is it important to look at these developmental stages? I didn't go through anything traumatic. So many people speak about that. And yes, of course, that might be true, right? And I think this can be the case for many individuals. Seems like the case for you, but I don't think any of us come out unscathed without any bruises, wounds, or any perhaps meanings that we had then created or interpretations that we make that essentially lead us to adapting from our true nature. Yeah. That essentially take us away from like who we believe ourselves to be at our core. It sounds like you just getting some of these imprints of, oh, I'm not that valuable, I'm not that interesting, I'm not good enough as I am. It just takes you into this whole route.
Yeah. It's really incredible. And even I said, yeah, great childhood, a lot of love and safety. But like one thing I got from my mom, she had a very challenging childhood, had to learn to be perfect all the time or she would get punished
Right.
also physically. So that then showed up in how we lived and how she raised me. And for example, I never understood why I almost can never bring friends to our place unless she had prepared the perfect meal. Everything was perfectly clean. And only then, because she was afraid the kids could go home to the parents and say, oh, she didn't have any good food at home or whatever. And always when we were outside, she said, you have to greet everybody friendly. It's not a bad thing, but it was like, you have to do that. We have to be dressed okay, because it's so important what other people think. So for me, this was extremely imprinted in my adult behavior.
Yep.
And I told her that. I had a really healing conversation with her around it. I said, thank you so much for everything you have done to me. I feel so grateful for all the love you gave me and the safety. And you gave me also one of my biggest weaknesses. And then we talked about it, and she owned it, and she said sorry. We hugged, maybe a few tears, and it was, yeah, it was beautiful.
I wonder how, just to maybe briefly touch on that, I wonder how that might have impacted your relationship to her in the aftermath, just having that honest discussion with her.
Yeah, I can share almost anything with her, and especially, like, I live far away. I don't talk to her that often, maybe once a week, but she's always been at her best as a mom when I needed her the most. And this is something that has even deepened, because that was like, I basically told her one thing you did wrong in raising me, which is the hardest thing to probably hear for a mother. But I said it in a loving way, and she could just receive it. And that made it even more safe for both of us, that, yeah, I'm also now an adult, and she is proud of me, and we can, there's nothing we have to hold back when we talk. And it's just great to have a parent like that in my corner, because I know it's not a given. I know many people who don't have that.
You mentioned you did it in a loving way. What does that mean to you?
It means, yeah, acknowledging all the great things she did for me.
Yep.
Speaking to her childhood and the compassion I have for her, and that I understand why she had to create that to be safe.
Right.
So giving a lot of understanding to her, praising her for everything she did, and then just saying, and two things can be true at the same time, that still this was difficult for me, but I get where it's coming from. And my intention wasn't, that's what I said to her in the end. I said, and because of this conversation in our family, this is going to end here, because when I have kids, we're going to do it differently, me as a dad and you as a grandma. And yeah, you can see I get emotional talking about this.
This is beautiful, man. It touches me as well. Like in the sense that I'm actually going back home in 5 days, and my intention as well is to have some very important conversations with my parents. And some of the listeners as well might be asking themselves, how might I be able to have such conversations? Because I think one of the things as well that I'm observing in myself, and I have a sense other people will be able to relate with, it's like, I think we're all mature enough, maybe not all of us, but many of us, that to honor the fact that our parents did the best that they could with the knowledge they had at the time, with the skills that they had at the time, with the resources they had at the time. So, like, if we can just take that as a fact. Now, at the same time, it doesn't negate the fact that their absence of knowledge or skills or maturity had impacted us.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I observe in myself is I don't need to blame my parents anymore. Like, I don't need to tell them you did this thing and it really like fucked me up. All I would like, if of course available, is to be heard, to be seen, and just to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
That this is what happened, and that's it. And I can move forward and say, I love what you said. Like, this is going to end with me.
Yeah.
I love that as a premise. And I'm not saying that this is going to be available with everyone. It's not. Absolutely not. I think there's many individuals that are just not willing to receive it, and kind of speaks as well to their own challenges, around looking at their flaws and imperfections, and like what that would mean for them, and as well the stuff that would arise. But I think that is as well a way to address that, just to, first of all, honor them, to bring understanding and empathy to the experiences, to take ownership, meaning that you don't blame her, but you just address, hey, this is my experience, this is what I'm navigating as a result of the upbringing. So it's more of an I ownership versus you did all this, and versus, so it's more about ownership versus blaming. And then also just taking ownership of the fact that, this is what happened, and I'm going to move forward from here, and I'm going to change this. So I think this is a really good framework. Yeah. I want to pivot back, and I want to talk a little bit more about this chapter of Life is a Beach Party. And I want to speak a little bit more around living life at the edge, living life in extremes, and this idea of the pursuit of pleasure. And one of the things that I often observe is when there's a strong pursuit for pleasure, there's going to be a strong aversion to pain. And I had, as well, a year ago, I had very awesome interview with a guy called Joshua Wenner,
Mm-hmm.
who has spent a lot of his life supporting individuals to move through grief, but also supporting veterans to develop emotional resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the statements he had made within our conversation really stood out for me, which is the greater the pain, the greater the pressure, the greater the pleasure.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
Talk to me a little bit more about that journey and how that as well specifically maybe impacted you and how you as well see it impacting other men when they go too much on a route of pleasure and then
Yeah.
avoiding pain.
Yeah, it's the pleasure thing is not sustaining.
Mm.
Like that I could have the best night ever and then feel good about it, and then the next day, if the next night wasn't successful or something, I would feel down.
Yeah.
And I think pleasure is great, but it's not fulfilling in the long term. I think now I also like to add pleasure to my life, but I don't make it the source of my happiness, which back in those days I thought that's the meaning of life. I
Mm.
just have as much pleasure as I can and totally avoiding pain. Like it was so I was so unable to have unpleasant experiences that we had this company and we would bring people to different bars and to different restaurants. Let's say there's 100 businesses on this island, but we can only work with 20. So 80 of them already don't like me because I don't bring the people there, even though I didn't do anything wrong. But I was so unable to feel that kind of dislike from these people, or some people would then talk to me and say, hey, why don't you bring people to my place and stuff. So I would actually start to walk ways around the island when I had to go one place that was 3 times longer than the actual way, because I didn't want to cross one door where somebody could talk to me. So much I was avoiding like anything painful, anything uncomfortable. And I was just living like this all the time, and I didn't even think it was weird.
Yeah.
And that's how strong patterns are.
Yeah.
But it was costing me so much energy, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that cost. So it sounds like, okay, it cost you a lot of energy. There was a lot of avoidance in the process.
Mm-hmm.
How else might it impact someone, like, let's just say in harmful ways, when we go too strongly in that route, particularly as men? Like I see that I think there is this really important element around having that capacity to actually withstand discomfort and actually lean into discomfort. And I think as well, considering anything that we might build
Yeah.
on the long term, like that moment of success or that moment of achievement that we're essentially aspiring for is an absolute fragment compared to that entire journey of discomfort, challenge, failure, all the things that we had addressed at the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah.
And if we have no capacity for that,
Yeah.
I think it creates a lot of difficulties in our lives. So I would love to hear a little bit more your perspectives on this.
Yeah, again, so I think pleasure doesn't create meaning. And when I was living this life, I was very much a boy, meaning I always tried to manipulate my life and situations and people. So I go the easy way, not the hard way. I was avoiding responsibility. I was trying to not do any tasks or spend any days of where I have to do things that I didn't like to do. So basically, I thought everything should be easy and comfortable.
Yeah.
And from that, one day came this real emptiness. Now, versus when I look at how I define being a man today and my masculinity, it's actually finding deep fulfillment in sometimes doing the hard thing, being able to withstand pleasure for something more meaningful, having a conversation that is hard to have, but I know it's the right thing to do, taking responsibility for my partner and her needs because I choose to do it, not because I please her for getting her approval. But just like my whole focus shifted completely on what actually makes me fulfilled and happy. Like the definition of happiness used to be pleasure and fun, while it was actually avoiding the things that are long-term fulfilling. And I also think that hardship in life is completely unavoidable. And I tried so hard to avoid any negative event in my life, and of course it didn't work. So it's almost like embracing those events now in real time. I'm still going to feel shit about it sometimes, but I'm like already, okay, what can I learn from this? Even for me, how can I bring this experience then to my clients? Because I'm in it now. I know what I'm feeling right now, and I can then share this. So already in this dark moment, I find hope and fulfillment in what I can do with this in the future. That was a great reframe for me. And also understanding with something, I know this is like this fun topic for memes, the ice baths and stuff like this. But what I did last year in Berlin in winter was every day, just for 1 month, I went in January every morning at 7 a.m. into the lake behind my house.
Nice.
And because what I noticed was, it was really, I didn't want to do it. I woke up and think, are you stupid? Why are you doing this to yourself? But coming out, I felt, and I'm not talking about the health benefits or something, just sense of accomplishment. You know, great, man, that you did this even though it was hard. And nobody sees it. You just did it. I come into the house, the coffee that I prepared myself, I was so much more grateful for, simply to be warm and having this warm cup of coffee. And like with a very, very simple thing, it just brought me back to a very grounding experience to, I don't need the next peak event like back in these days, the next better party, the better travel, the more interesting woman. But just like I can be with myself and I'm doing the right things every day. And this kind of like, growing this capacity for discomfort. Because if I can do that every day, surely if life throws something at me, I can deal with that as well. And knowing that life will always throw things at me, it makes me so much more calm and grounded, knowing that I have the tools and the capacity to move through it no matter what.
Yeah. Love all that, man. I love how challenge essentially shapes and forms as well our character over time. And when we can step into it deliberately, how it essentially supports us for those moments when we actually have to be resilient, when we actually have to show up. And so I think I really strongly believe in this idea of going through difficulties deliberately, not in a masochistic way,
Yeah.
but in a deliberate, conscious way where we go through discomfort because life will bring its challenges.
Yeah.
Life will throw stuff at us. And so I think to me, such experiences are really the training ground for us to then be able to meet those experiences and not absolutely collapse. And I think this is also something that, builds a lot of self-belief. It builds a lot of character. It builds a lot of confidence over time. And, like, a lot of people want confidence, but I think, confidence is earned, man. Like, confidence is earned. You don't just get confidence. You got to work hard for that shit.
100%. Just saw yesterday, I think, again, this reel, maybe you saw it from Jimmy Carr, where he says, you don't get confident by the six pack, but you get confident from being the kind of person who goes to the gym on a regular basis to get the six pack.
That's it.
And I thought, this is great, right? It's just knowing I am the person who I say I am, and I'm trusting that I can do difficult things. And if I can do that, I'm going to be okay.
There's numerous things that I'm just tracking our time, and I noticed there's numerous things that I would still love to dive into with you. And I guess a bridge that I would just love to create is, we had kind of described a little bit of your Rene 1.0, and I'm really curious, how did that transition go towards Rene 2.0? And there's also really this curiosity around, like, when did you actually start to discover, oh, like, I'm a 35-year-old, like a boy in a man's body, and what was that transition like for you to actually start stepping into manhood?
So actually, I think 2017, my self-exploration journey started, but it wasn't so much about masculinity, but there was a bit more awareness coming to the surface that I actually have things to work on. And then I would say in particular, this masculinity topic, it's so powerful and touching to me today, because even if I compare myself to the average man, I was way more out of integrity with the masculine qualities I appreciate in myself today than the average person. I was very far on the other spectrum of not being that man. So to me, it feels really powerful, the shift that I have been able to achieve. And I'm actually proud of that. And it happened in a relatively short time. I would say one big shift for me was a quite unusual one that started to happen in 5 or 6 years ago. I moved to, it's not a whole different story, but I moved to Ukraine and I met my ex-girlfriend there, then my ex-fiance. And just there, I grew up with the 50-50 mindset, man, woman, like, don't even want to pay for dinner, basically, to being in a country where this is absolutely and completely normal. And it's just the bare minimum. Like, it's just what it is. So, and then being there and then being with her, in addition to that was the fact she was a student from a simple family. So she's in a country like this where the economy is difficult. So she didn't have any money. So I kind of had to provide that if I wanted to spend time with her. Yeah. Within that relationship, being with a very feminine woman, she suddenly showed me things that I didn't see before. She supported me in ways that I didn't know a woman could support me in, taking weight off my shoulders, bringing joy into my days, inspires me, and appreciates the things that I did for her, not really voluntarily in the start because I had to, but I saw what I'm getting back, and suddenly my brain started to think, okay, maybe there's actually some logic to this dynamic, because as a team, suddenly we were functioning better, and that made me also feel really good, feel seen, appreciated, and that was the start to it. Then I came to Bali doing the breathwork training, where I did a lot of breathwork sessions myself, as you know, in the training. And a lot of my sessions were about my masculinity. And it was quite surprising to me because that was more on a really then feeling embodied level. I still remember this one session really vividly. And the theme, the phrase that came up was the man at peace. And the man at peace was what I felt. I was at this bonfire, and there was like this community in a village. And I felt very strongly, I am a man that is at peace, that is a leader. And I wasn't alone. There were some other strong men, and we were leading together. I didn't feel envy for them. I just felt like at peace with myself, grateful that there is other great men in the community who help me lift up those who are weaker. I was looking at the woman sitting at the fire, and I looked at her and I wanted to protect her. I saw these children or another weak man who was sick, and I didn't feel like pushing down on him. I wanted to lift him up. And I just had this amazing whole body. I get goosebumps now when I think about it. Experience of that's what I want to feel like as a man. Responsible, in integrity, open heart, loving, not shying away from my emotions. In fact, I think now that's really masculine to have the courage to sometimes share what's real rather than avoid it. And yeah, and then there were a few more sessions around that, but then that's really got me thinking about this topic and like, hey, this is beautiful. And it made me sad how it's talked about in society now, this being that bad thing to be masculine. I'm like, if they would just felt what I have felt, they could never say that, because I was way more dangerous to society, to women, less of a contribution when I was not masculine at all, because I was manipulating and I was,
Help me or help our listeners understand a little bit more of what you're seeing now as I'll use my words for it, but as the beauty in men, but also the beauty in being masculine, and perhaps as well reclaiming some of those values that we had somewhat pushed away as a result of this movement towards equality or maybe even independence.
Yeah, first of all, to me, being in my masculine means way less anxiety because I'm doing the right thing. I'm honest. I'm not hiding. So in the past, I was hiding, manipulating. So I was always afraid, when is the scaffolding going to break down? If they're going to find out that I'm not who I say I am. That was constantly making me nervous. So now I'm just like, I'd rather say the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, but people know where they're at. What I experienced through that is so much trust. Like, if you're somebody who is able to really be fully authentic and people feel that, and they know they get the truth from you, no matter what, even if it's uncomfortable, they will relax around you because they don't have to second guess what you feel about them. They can trust you. Because I will also say when I'm not available for something, and being okay if somebody doesn't like it, that was impossible in the past. Again, takes a lot of stress from me, helps me to be more grounded. If I'm grounded and present, be that in my business relationships, my romantic relationships, I feel much more aligned with me, with my essence, more proud of myself. If I stay out of integrity, I immediately feel, if I can say that, decrease in my masculine energy, or how I just know it's wrong.
Yep.
So it's like, it's just, for me, it's a lot about just doing the right thing and being real, not being perfect, but taking responsibility. And I look at responsibility as something beautiful now. It gives me something. It's lifting people up, inspiring. And to me, that's only possible if I'm really raw and really honest and owning all parts of myself. Also, sometimes the weak ones, but at the same time doing the embodiment work that we did with a lot of breathwork and stuff to be actually able to hold myself in my triggers, because that's the next thing. In trigger, when we are at our worst, when we're deeply hurt or triggered, the way we act in those situations, I think, can really have a huge impact on our relationships. And in the past, I would have snapped and do or say things that I would later regret in a trigger. While it's now the trigger is here, I acknowledge it, but I can still stay with myself. And being then really proud of how I acted in this situation rather than ashamed.
Love all this. And again, so much that we could
I
take
told you
from
it's
this.
very difficult for me to keep short.
No, I hear you, man. But like I'm tracking all of it. And I guess one of the things I just really want to highlight as well is just this very interesting dynamic I'm seeing around your relationship to responsibility, where it's like in the past, it really appears to me that you had abdicated responsibility completely and didn't want any of that, right? Like, you know, people in your hometown wanted to throw responsibility at you and you didn't want to look at it at the time, right? Whereas now, like, you see it actually as something empowering. And this is what I'm as well seeing. Like, there is almost this very intricate nature towards the amount of responsibility we're willing to take and the amount of power we'll feel as well as a result of that. And I think this is something that is often missed, you know, like, I mean, there's this really common saying from the Spider-Man movie, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think, you know, these things, like, they happen vice versa. And I guess one of the things, again, I want to just bookmark this conversation around relationships for a little bit later, but one of the things that I find curious, and I wonder as well how much your journey with breathwork had supported around that, but the word that I'm really falling in love with recently has been containment. This idea of being contained as a man, like this capacity to, because that's like to be grounded for me is the byproduct of good containment within ourselves. Like, because as men, you know, and we can also train ourselves to actually feel maybe not just as much as women, but a lot, right? But that capacity to actually be contained with it, to be solid in it, to not like waver everywhere. That is a skill that one can train, that I think as well is something very impactful. And I think this is something that people will respect and appreciate. Other men will trust you more deeply. Women will feel safer with you, and as well as a result will want to as well open more deeply to you. So 100%. To bring it back to a question, would you say that breathwork had really supported you on a journey of that? And maybe a follow-up to that, what had been the impact for you to step into this journey of, I guess, leaving this entire life behind that you had previously and really focus fully on breathwork?
So, yeah, I think I notice very often when I'm talking to people who did a lot of therapy, for example, that they have a lot of awareness about their challenges, but they're not able to contain themselves in when it matters. And I think that's why I say to everybody now, that's also why we combine it, right? And you do it as well in the coaching.
Totally.
Like, have the mind-based, the conversations, but then embody it with breathwork, because you just feel it on a deeper level. If you have never tried it, it's hard to explain. But for me, this was really giving me a lot of ground and like removing some of the deeper pieces that were like stuck in the body, that then made me unable to stay with myself in triggering situations. And that changed after breathwork. It's just a completely different angle. And I think we need both. We need awareness, we need to talk about things, and we need to integrate it with embodiment practices. There's also other things, not only breathwork, but for me, this has been the most powerful tool for sure. and had a conversation with a friend the other day and about his relationship a little bit, and he said, "Oh yeah, well, we talked about everything. She wants to do this differently," and I'm like, "But man, these are some really deep things in behavior, and this is not just going to change because she wants to. Like this is the kind of thing that needs embodiment work and deeper work." And like I said, I'm sorry to say this, but through this work, if I learned one thing, it's like people don't just change deep behavioral patterns because they read a book or because they think, oh, that wasn't good, I want to do it like this now. It's much deeper, so it's not easy at all, but you can work on it, and you can shift it for sure, but it's actual work. It's not just a quick fix.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of this analogy around like, are you going to take a horse going on that journey of personal growth, or are you going to take a car or maybe other vehicles as well to actually move faster along that journey?
Yeah.
And I guess one of the considerations that I'm as well having is that embodiment work is fundamental. I absolutely agree with you, and that's also why, like, what I believe in and what I'm a stand for. But also I really see the importance of like us not being able to do this on our own. And I would actually argue that, because like this is also something I often hear from other men, and I really admire actually and appreciate their desire to actually want to be resilient enough to actually figure it out like on their own. I think in some ways, I think, how do I say this in a delicate way? In many ways, within the realms of men's work, we speak about the importance of men coming together in brotherhood. And I absolutely believe in that, and I agree with that. And, we're going to be stronger and we'll move further when we're with each other. But I also see that there is an absolute importance in a man having the capacity to be on his own, to be in a room on his own, all alone, and still have the capacity to actually trust himself and to not collapse. So we need both. We need both. And so I see that a lot of guys want to go on that journey on their own. And I would argue very often what I'm observing, it's actually part of their protective mechanism, which is they don't want to be seen. They don't want to be seen in those vulnerable aspects that will, without a doubt, come to the surface the moment there is actually a skilled practitioner in front of him asking the right questions. And I think there's also something just to say about the importance of actually having spaces where we can drop the part of us that needs to do it all on himself, and actually just for the time being of the therapeutic or embodied container to actually give that responsibility to the other person to actually hold the structure, so we can truly be in that space where we can just allow ourselves to feel or actually just move through the things that are required. And this is also what I'm seeing every time I'm going through challenges. Sure, I can do it on my own in some ways, but arguably at this stage of my life, if there is something that I'm not fully seeing, I will most often work with another practitioner, or I'll hire someone, or do a few sessions with someone, because generally there's blind spots that we just cannot see. And they're designed for that. So I've said a lot here, so just want to throw it back at you if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, no, I just fully agree. It's, I mean, this is my life. My life is working with people on a deep level, coaching myself. I do that, try to do that a lot as well, and really go deep within myself. And still, I take support. I have a coach. I have a therapist. Therapist I only call when there's like really like a very pressing topic that I want to talk about, and she's a woman, so I got a female perspective.
Nice.
And the coach is a guy who I worked with for almost a year now, and yeah, no matter how reflected you are, no matter how much you work these things, there's always going to be blind spots, and sometimes for somebody from the outside, it's just easy to see, hold up the mirror, and I'm like, oh shit. So it has been hugely beneficial to me, and I also think, it's great for any coach, no matter how good you are, that you have somebody in your corner that reflects back to you. I think it's great. And community, as well. I think many men also are ashamed to ask for help and like think, oh, it's shameful, or if I can't figure it out by myself. Also, when it comes to relationship coaching and stuff like this, it's like, oh well, no, I don't need help with women because I want to be the guy, you know. So yeah, it's definitely some shame there. And one of the most beautiful things I see with our work at Really Align is, yes, the retreat that we like, the things that we do, the breath work, the exercises, they're really powerful, but also the community that is created simply by the men being in a space where they are open and vulnerable in front of each other, see each other laugh, see each other cry. And that just creates such a bond. And many of them say, I never had that. Like, just being this open, being that seen, that accepted, seeing other guys who I from the outside thought have it all together, also have the baggage. It's also very liberating, and it's like we're in this together, and it suddenly feels good to just talk without masks, without filter, and this, yeah, communities, I would say, became one of the most valuable things that our company offers, even though it wasn't even the really main intention.
And I would argue most men that I at least as well work with want that, but they don't actually know how to get there on their own. And so they actually need a skilled practitioner or someone who is able to curate the space in such a way for those masks to fall off. Because so often we don't even know what fucking masks we're wearing, and as
Yes.
well how they show up in interrelationship to another person. And so, it really requires that skill. And then as soon as we have, and it can be an uncomfortable process around like releasing that mask and allowing ourselves to be truly seen, because there's usually something very tender and very vulnerable that we're protecting on the other side of the mask. But once that side of us is seen and we can feel this aspect of us is accepted and welcomed, it's fucking liberating, and we don't want anything else, man.
Yeah.
So I want to maybe just dive a little bit more deeply into the conversation around facilitated breath repatterning. And, from my understanding, you had come into this training and you didn't ever, and you kind of went into it with blind faith as well, from my
Yeah, yeah.
understanding.
Uh-huh.
Like you had your friend Pete,
Yeah.
who as well is a friend of mine, and he had just shared with you, hey, a spot has opened
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
and I would love for you to do this training.
Mm.
And you just went into it, and you had no idea what was
Yeah.
expecting you. But then you came out of that saying, all right, this is what I'm going to dedicate my life to. Help us understand a little bit around that exploration.
Yeah, it was we left Ukraine when the war started, and that kind of, and I knew I was in the process of leaving the travel company, and it's not for me anymore. But I didn't really know what I'm gonna do next, and I went out traveling. I was in Costa Rica when Pete called me and like basically come to Bali, do this training that costs quite some money. That you know have to spend a few months in Bali. It's like a big decision to make, but I didn't really know what else I wanted, and it just felt right. And I looked at him and his progress that he had made through breathwork, how he went through his breakup that was very difficult, how he was able to contain himself as well and function, knowing that in the past that would have been much harder for him. So I saw some real life proof in him that shifted, and that gave me the trust to just do it without really knowing what I'm going to do with it. And I think it was like 1 month in when I had this really, really, really powerful session, and I realized, okay, this is it. This is something I want to share with people.
Hmm.
And then the next day, our friend Bjorn, who had a super successful business in Germany, exited for a ridiculous amount of money. I met for the first time, talked to him for 2 hours, and at the end of the conversation, we decided we start a company, and I moved to Berlin because he has a great network there. And basically, he had worked with Pete, and it helped him tremendously. And he said, "I know so many people in Berlin who need this, and I wanted to share it, and I speak German, so I'm like, let's do it." And then we founded the company with Pete, Bjorn, and I. Went to Berlin, no idea how this is going to be received. This kind of, special breathing technique with coaching, like it's it's pretty new, so there was a lot of explaining that we had to do. But yeah, first few clients went really well, and then they started to recommend, and now we have a really solid crew of great men, entrepreneurs that have built very successful companies, but have a very open heart and are really willing to lean in and also impact the people in their lives differently, their companies, their employees, communicate differently with them, with less masks, and still finding a way that, you know, is not too spiritual and still like, yeah, you can still do your business, you can still, you don't have to lose all of that, basically, because that's a fear many men also have. If I dive too deep into the personal self-development space, am I going to lose my drive? Am I going to just want to
Big
walk in
time.
the forest without shoes? And
Hear that a lot as well.
you know,
Yeah, as you mentioned, like you work in a very similar manner as I do as well, and I think there is something incredibly potent in the combination of a top-down approach through the use of coaching and essentially using those cognitive functions that particularly a lot of men are going to be very adept at with some form of embodied facilitation where we can do, different exercises or different practices where we essentially can incorporate a certain theme or certain idea into the body, and noticing as well how these things essentially arise within the body, whether it's, people pleasing, avoiding conflict, that capacity to be truly honest. And there's a lot that we can discover within those aspects. And then combining it, of course, with just a very, very powerful practice of facilitated breath repatterning. I think that truly is where I would argue some of the most transformational work happens. It is within that marriage between the two, that
yes,
capacity to actually use the left brain and the top-down approach versus the right brain and the bottom-up approach. And we need both. And, using that as well in my work, I can definitely just attest to the potency of it. So, yeah, it's really awesome what you guys are doing.
yeah. Would you say, like in your recent trainings that you did in the States and stuff, is there, is there a lot of other embodiment practices that you now incorporate in your coachings?
Yeah,
Apart
so
from
I
breathwork?
don't use their practices per se, but it has definitely inspired me to think creatively in new ways. And I think there's something very unique to John in the sense that he explores embodiment in a very different way. So within the way that I learned it with Edward and other teachers, it's more about inhabiting the body and getting really sensitive and getting really attuned to the messages of the body. And I would argue that is the more traditional way of looking at this idea of embodiment. But the way John works with it and uses it is very interesting, which is more of a, I'm going to say a shamanic way of looking at it. So we're going to go a little bit more woo-woo, more spiritual with it. But you will explore different textures. And then he has this way of guiding you, of embodying them into your body. So we would explore a lot around certain textures like fierce love, and looking what it would look like to embody fierce love through the body. Maybe there are certain archetypes that he guides us into: warrior, lover, king,
Yeah.
magician. And he guides us into incorporating and like adding those simply through our breath, through our gaze, through our postures. So I'm not going to say too much more to his work, but I just want to say, like, I want to attest to the fact that it's incredibly potent. And yeah, he's definitely onto something incredible. But I would say outside of that, I would say a lot of the mentors that I've worked with outside of John, they have just as well taught me to explore embodiment in numerous other ways. And there's almost this curiosity around how we can use these. Like I'm very similar to you. Like I like working with individuals who are very much in the world and are not so much like really far out in the spiritual side of things. I like to be really practical and on the point,
Yeah.
and really work with individuals who, are doing a lot of great stuff in the world, right? Because I've spent a lot of time as well with individuals who are, let's just say, escaping from the world because they have found spirituality for themselves, and I'm absolutely not up for that. And simultaneously, I'd explored, or am exploring, how we can bring back some of these, let's just call them Eastern traditions, such as Qigong or some of the more esoteric breath practices, like yoga and pranayama, and how we can bring them in accessible ways for other men that doesn't sound woo-woo, but actually helps them bring it into their lives in ways that they can actually feel the effects of it, because it's absolutely had incredible effect on me. Like, one of the things I love is qigong, because it's had an awesome effect around my capacity to contain myself, to be sensitive, but also to really be fully clear and grounded. And I love the experience and the feeling that it has on my body. So yeah, I would say those are some things I'm exploring. But I'm a bit like a scientist who had been exploring a lot of different things, and now it's really me about starting to bring things together in my own unique way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
epic.
Well, let's close this conversation just around this theme of relationships. And you had mentioned that you had been, the way I see it, you were essentially thrown into this very interesting, very novel, and very different dynamic that you had never experienced before, meeting your Ukrainian partner at the time. And I had mentioned to you as well within our last conversation, I come from a Eastern European family. My parents are both from
Yeah.
Kazakhstan originally. So I very much understand what you're talking about around these traditional, let's just say, dynamics and roles that people hold. And I would argue everyone has to kind of find their own way around it.
Yeah.
But it seems like you really touched on something like very impactful with that. That's something that had yeah, let's just say left a lasting mark on you around the impact that we can have when one adopts one role, let's just say, and then the other one the other. Could you elaborate a little bit further on that, and but also how you see, like, what do you now see as some of the principles for lasting love and lasting relationship?
Ooh, where do I start? First of all, I want to say, yeah, every couple has to create the relationship that fits them. If you live in a New York City, it's probably going to be more that both people are working and it's like this
Totally.
environment, this culture. And yeah, like I'm not saying it should be only the man is providing, the woman is at home or just in the kitchen. Please don't misunderstand me at all. I actually think it's super important that a woman also has a passion, something she's really has fire for. All I'm saying is that for me personally, it's secondary whether she makes a lot of money with it or not, because I want to be the main provider for my future family because it feels good to me. Not because I have to or because she's demanding it. That's what I choose. And I feel with this decision comes a dynamic that I learned to love. And that's like when I feel a woman, and many of my clients say they want this feminine energy and they can't pin it down. What is it? But when I see it, when I feel it, it gives me things, it brings things out in me that I can't access myself. Yeah. So what I'm experiencing now in my new connection is that she makes me slow down naturally. She helps me see small things, appreciate small things. The masculine things I'm doing for her, like we were on the bike driving to the mountains, and I noticed on her skin that she was cold, and it was a bit colder than we expected. And I asked her if she's cold, and she said, "Oh, it's okay." But I knew she was cold, so I just stopped in the next like little village and bought her like some pants and a hoodie. And just what I got back from that in her energy, and she shared that later. These are the things that made me so cared for. The soft gaze, the way she looks at me, how she smiles, how she appreciates nature. And me as a man, simply looking at this woman being in her feminine, joyful self, this is the gift I get in return because I don't have access to that myself. But when I see that, this is like, this is what I'm doing it for. And then, okay, I'm paying for most things, but money is just one currency in the relationship. But in our world, it's valued as the currency. Or why do I have to pay? I'm like, yes, but as a team, we are better like this. And I enjoy doing this.
Yeah. No, I love it, man. And, I just want to as well acknowledge that I've had my own experiences around this and, very much, of course, I came from a family with more maybe traditional values. At the same time, I, in many ways, divorced myself from my family and rejected them. And, eventually found kind of like that, all that 50-50 culture as well. And, you know, like I also had this like tendency towards hyper independence with myself. So I didn't want to, you know, essentially like take care for someone out of fear that there might be an enmeshed relationship as a result. So there's a bit of that wounding, I guess, that I had. But for me to witness the dynamic that I had in my most recent relationship, which ended last year in February, it had been profound for me just to witness the things that I would do that would essentially open and reveal and bring out that feminine quality that you had addressed. You mean that lightheartedness, that sense of play, that sense of joy, that sense of nurturance, that sense of, I'm just going to say, she brought the color out in life in ways that I knew I couldn't. And that was everything. Like when I felt that for the first time, I was like, that is fucking everything. Like that is everything to me. Like just how it would move my heart, how it would touch my heart. And I noticed instinctively there was this desire to protect that.
Yes.
To take care of that. To be there for that. And so I really just want to speak just to the, you know, very instinctual nature of that and how it like it moves us. And I'm not saying that this is going to be the exact dynamic that you know, I'm going to have in my next relationship. I don't know, right? You know,
it's a spectrum as well, like how much of that you want to bring in. You can, you know, figure that out with whatever feels right with this person.
Totally, right? You know, and I think I don't believe as well you're suggesting some black and white format around how to operate in this. Everyone gets to choose this, right? For themselves, and you get to as well create and design your relationship in that way. So, yeah, I had a very interesting conversation with an individual called Michaela Bohm. You know, who's quite famous out in the States and works with a lot of celebrities in the realms of relationships and love. And, you know, she speaks really to the importance around defining our own culture around relationship and really getting crystal clear on the purpose of our relationship. And, you know, I think you're touching on something very primal in us and something very instinctual. And having experienced that as well, I see as well just the beauty of that. Yeah, I wonder, maybe just to offer a last closing question on that before I ask you my parting question. I wonder what are some of the difficulties that you see with the men that come to you for relationships, and as well, what are some of the guidance that you offer him?
Yeah, I think in the start it's that many people ignore compatibility and just go off of chemistry and superficial attraction, and then find themselves in attachment or in love with a person that is actually not a match for them at all. And then love becomes pain. And they're ignoring the red flags in the start because she's so beautiful and I'm sure we're going to fix it later. But then you're in it. And it's like, I think human beings, we are complicated. And if we want to build a life with somebody without resentment, but with joy and connection, we need to be compatible. This is my opinion. And we need to work. Both people need to be able to listen, to work on the relationship. It can work otherwise, but in my opinion, it's going to be not as fulfilled. It's going to be a lot of masks. There's going to be less connection. It's probably going to be a boring sex life after a couple of years if there's no open communication. Arguments, maybe cheating. You know, that's like, I think in order to remove all of that, we need full openness and we need work in accountability and compassion for each other and holding each other in our worst parts and listening to them, having the capacity to listen in these moments. And I think, yeah, that's like the start that many people get into relationships that are destined maybe to fail from the beginning. 90% of relationships fail in the Western world, you know, crazy statistic actually. And almost nobody's actively working on it. If we had this statistic in...
That is an accurate statistic?
Well, ChatGPT said it.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
Yeah, so it's...
Right.
But because I was thinking, if you take all relationships, not just marriages, most of them fail, right?
Yeah.
And if you would have a 90% likelihood of your business failing or your kid fails 90% of tests, surely you would do something about it.
Sure.
But relationships is kind of like I'll figure it out next time. There's like some, yeah. But yeah, I think it's just, for me, that's the reason is like a lack of authenticity and like the courage to really show all parts of ourselves. Um, and how we are in conflict. This is huge for me. What you said before, your containment. And I think also this is, in many cases, this is going to be the role more of the man, I think, to be able to hold her emotions in difficult situations. And even if she is emotional and she wants to share something that is triggering you as a man, be that around self-worth, jealousy, even if it's the worst thing she could say to you, if you have the ability to sit there and still ask a follow-up question, and how she feels and why she feels that way, rather than snapping back and letting her express everything she wants in this moment and hold her in that, no matter how much you dislike it, I think that's a superpower. And then, of course, once emotions have sat down, you speak your piece as well. And you say, hey, this is what's come up for me. This part of me came up. I need this in the future. But in the moment when there's emotional charge, it's not effective to shoot back. Nobody's going to be listening to each other. Trust in the next conflict is going to dissolve. There's going to be fear of the next conflict. There's maybe going to be not as much honesty because I will hold back because last time it escalated. And then there's less trust. But if we can create a conflict culture where both are safe in the conflict, then it's like nothing can stop us in the future. Conflicts will come, but we navigate it well. And I think that is also one of my role in my today's role as a man, my masculinity, that I have this ability to stay grounded even when I hate what she's saying to me.
It's beautiful, man. And I noticed the impulse and desire as well to go further into that, but recognizing as well that we had a limitation on the time that we had as well planned in for the studio. We won't be able to go further into that. But I do just maybe want to take a moment just to reflect on the value essentially that you had communicated around the importance around, essentially creating that really strong and robust foundation initially. And, essentially beginning with alignment, beginning with compatibility, beginning with the shared vision, beginning with the shared purpose, beginning with the shared values, and really ensuring that all of those are robust before adding the fire. Because like one of the things as well that we addressed at the beginning of before we started rolling is how easy it is to have that fire and then lose ourselves in the fire because it feels so fucking good, right? And especially when the bonding hormones start kicking in, I mean, then we're in it as you had communicated. And that is interesting enough where Michaela Bohm as well said, one of the leading places where couples come to work with her, but also where relationships fall apart because they had chosen chemistry over compatibility. And to your point as well, man, conflict. I mean, for me, it's an absolute red flag nowadays. If I hear a woman saying that, she's not someone that likes conflict or doesn't want to have conflict in the relationship, I would actually argue it's not that I like conflict, but I would argue it's actually our capacity to confront and lean into conflict when, of course, it arises, because our triggers arise. Often it's not because of the other person, but it's more what the person represents in probably image of mommy and daddy that usually is arising in those moments. And so our capacity to actually be loving with each other, to hold each other and to care for each other in those moments and come out of it on the other side, usually we find more trust. We find more trust when we're able to go through conflict and repair on the other side. And I notice, at least in myself, I feel the willingness to open up more to my partner when I feel, okay, we have gone through these challenges and I trust that we can do that again. And so I think that is absolutely essential. And to your point as well, just the importance around containment. Not both people can be emotionally processing at the same fucking time. That doesn't work. We need to have one individual who's more solid, more grounded. And then, of course, if there is a piece as well here that presents itself for you, afterwards, once the other person is regulated, we can then share that. So thanks, man. Dude, this has been a very wild and, beautiful conversation where we went into a lot of different directions. Where can our listeners find you? And as well, is there anything you want our listeners to know about?
You can find me on Instagram, Rene Schwarzgruber. It's not that easy for the English listeners. Also I live usually in Europe or most of the year in Berlin. So if anybody is around Germany, feel free to reach out. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Well, I just want to commend you for, being who you are. Again, I just want to acknowledge your relatability, your willingness just to really be honest and be authentic and like share your rough edges, and it's something that's been deeply moving and inspiring.
Yeah, likewise, really thank you for having me, especially speaking to what you spoke to, seeing this kind of competition between us and still having me sharing your audience now with me, and us just, having good connection, and really appreciate that.
Agreed, man. Agreed. As a parting question, maybe in a minute or less, I would love to ask you if you would look at that Rene 12 to 13 years ago when you had started Life is a Beach Party.
Yeah.
And if you had the opportunity to speak to him right now and just be in front of him, I wonder what would you tell him, and as well, what guidance would you be providing him in this moment?
I think I would tell him, that's actually not that deep, but it's the first thing that comes up. I would tell him to earlier start looking at himself and not seeking all this outside validation, because even though it was super fun, I did miss, now I feel, a few valuable years of building and creating something that is more meaningful. I'm 40 now and I'm kind of late to the party with this. That really fulfills me. So I would probably tell him you only need 5 years of this and not 12. And I think I was pretty quickly able to pick up that there is more if I would have just looked, and I would have feel more fulfilled sooner.
Beautiful. Let's close it on that note.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rene. To our listeners, I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation. As always, if you feel that another man, another person may value from this conversation, ensure to pay it forward. And until next time, signing off. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.